Welcome back to the All 32 pod. We made it. Will more than I did because Will is a trooper out there. That young guy. He's out there. He's dealing late at night. Giardi, I got to be in bed before midnight or I turn into a pumpkin. That's just the way it is. Mike Giardi, Will Parkinson, back from the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. A reminder, this show brought to you by PRIZEPICKS, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. We got a lot to get into based on what we were able to garner, some of the things that we were able to see in Indianapolis. But let's just first start, Will, with the freaks at edge. And one guy that we've been talking about since the Senior Bowl and saying this guy was going to test like crazy, Shemar Stewart, and he put on an absolute show, the Texas A&M defensive end.
Yeah, now the number one RAS score in the last 38 years, I believe.
Relative athletic score, yep.
Yeah, since it's been tracked. I think Keith and StatBomb or whatever does a great job. Like Shemar, you see it on tape. It's not like this is something that you don't – everyone expected him to test well. He ran slower than I thought he was going to run. But I don't really care about the long speed with an edge rusher. I care about the 10-yard split, which he 94th percentile, 95th percentile, I think a 156 or 158 official. That's stupid at that size and that height.
Exactly.
Jermaine Johnson's, skyrocketed up a lot of people's boards because, a couple years ago, I remember at the Jets, it was like, dude, his 10-yard split's ridiculous. And they look for that explosive, in a pinch. And then do you have the long enough speed you can chase somebody down? And I remember them drafting him saying, hey, he could chase Josh Allen down. And he has. Obviously, he was hurt last year. Shemar's like 800 times a better athlete than Jermaine. Like, I already know what people are going to do is the stats and the production. Hey, his win rate's lower than his teammates and 4.5 sacks. My counter would be
for 3 years,
which
is crazy.
My Trayvon Walker comp and Jadeveon Clowney are two guys that I think he's more of Clowney in the NFL, where elite run defender, a lot of pressures. Everyone around him is going to be really going to benefit from playing next to him, but he's probably a 3 to 12 sack a year guy, and you're not really sure what you're going to get. And it's like he gets to the quarterback, and sometimes you got to kind of teach a little bit of the, hey, break down here because you're going a million miles an hour, like the Mighty Ducks. You're the best skater on the field and the ice. Like, can you stop, or are you just going to go into the boards? But Shemar's amazing in the run game. I think he murders people, and then there is really good reps as a pass rusher, and we saw it down in Mobile, and I would just say this. Nick Scranton, Walter Nolan, Shemar Turner, all those guys are in the same recruiting class at Texas A&M, and all of them, everyone's like, oh, their production kind of sucks, and it's like, well, maybe it's the system to some extent. I'm not fully blaming it because I hate that excuse of it's just the system, it's just the scheme, the whole thing. But this is the entire D-line of 5-star recruits that are all going to go in the first 60 picks of this draft that are testing like absolute freaks. And, everything you hear on Shemar, I got to meet him a couple times. Seems like he loves football. Seems like a great kid. I don't know. It seems like it does click upstairs. I would say I'm not sure that's entirely the case for the rest of that class. I understand the reservations, but there's no way he's not going to be a top 10 pick. He's the most athletic defensive end. He's the same measurables as Myles Garrett. He played freshman year, Mike, and sophomore year at 305. Played inside, played outside. Played this year at somewhere in the 290s. Came to Mobile at 281, and then came to the Combine at 267, which to me is him saying, you want me to play at 305? I'll play at 305. You want me to play at 265 and move and bend a little bit more? Cool. So I don't know. When guys broad like that, vertical jump, he's got insane arms. He's an 86-inch wingspan. Like you think Mykel Williams has long arms,
right?
Shemar Stewart's are longer. Production, albeit like it's a risk for sure, but I don't know how you sit there and go like, this guy sucks. Right coaching staff should be able to make that guy a hell of an NFL player if it clicks for him.
Well, let's go to another athletic freak that was off the edge, and that's James Pearce from Tennessee. And we talked about Pearce before we went to the Combine, and you've noticed he was the odds-on favorite to be the number one pick back in August. And then as the season starts going on, and Brugler does his list, and DJ does his list, he's 10. And then as we've gotten further in the process, all of a sudden yeah, all of a sudden they're doing their mock drafts and he's 27th. And we told you that there are some questions about the kid. And again, I don't think there's anything been discovered that's horrible in his background, but just again, there are whispers about who he is. And so the interview process this week in particular, and then of course when he takes his 30 visits all over the place, going to be very important for Pearce to let everybody know, like, hey, the stuff that you're hearing, it's not true, or this is what happened, etc., etc. 6'5", 245, ran a 4.47 40, a 1.58 in the 10-yard split, so it's basically the same as Stewart. Stewart was 1.56, Pearce is 1.58. More productive in college in terms of the sack numbers.
Yeah, for sure.
I think people were happier with his weight. There's some concern because he's longer.
He's Will McDonald.
Yeah, exactly. But so he tested very well. But again, while that's nice.
Well, he tested the stuff we knew he was good at well. He also verticaled 32 inches.
Right.
And he didn't do 3-cone. Like, that's the one thing I would push back on. Not push back on you, but just in general. Shemar did a lot of things. Again, like he needs to do 3-cone at A&M's pro day. Like that's a must have for me. Like
right.
if you look at the productivity of edge rushers, I believe. Oh my God, I'm gonna blank out on who wrote it over. But someone posted a clip of like the best edge rushers in the league, and they're all, sub a certain time in the 3-cone. You want to see Shemar do that, and to Pearce, I knew he was fast and he was quick. That's his whole game. He's 200. He played probably 230 pounds this year. I want to know how he is off the field, and he's just not explosive in the other ways I would like an edge rusher to be. And a lot of those guys, like the arm length's not great, and he's not a good jumper. And again, you could say that's whatever, and yeah, you're probably right. But something John Ledyard, who's really good with D-line stuff, tweeted out. He was like, "Don't ever don't double count guys because they're fast and you already knew they were fast," right? It's like me being like, Mike's really good at writing, and then giving Mike credit for being a good writer twice. It's like, well, that doesn't. Yeah, why do you get credit twice? That's my point. Just to be cautious of people like today when Isaiah Bonner, tomorrow when he runs and he runs in the 4.2s, great. That's awesome. Your game is being fast. So I would certainly hope you're fast is my point.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, he's one of those guys, and they're actually, and we've talked about this before. Like, for as much as the testing numbers that people are going to pay attention to, you talk to teams around the league, and the testing is sort of like confirmation, right? Like we saw this on tape, or hey, he did something that we didn't think he could do on tape, so now let's go back and double check. Did we miss something there? Did we not see the fluidity? Whatever the case may be. But for a lot of these teams, the thing that matters most is getting the guy in a room with a guy and putting a little pressure on him one way or the other, right? And figuring out what the kid's all about and whether you can trust that when that kid comes into your system, if you bring him in, that he is going to do what you need him to do. And particularly when we're talking about guys at the top end of the draft, because you just never want to make a selection in the first round and then be like, oh, bust. We've totally screwed that up. You can't have those sorts of issues. Abdul Carter did not test, obviously planning on doing his stuff at Penn State on Pro Day, which I believe is March 28th. But there was the medical that came out that he has a stress reaction in his foot. Surgery doesn't appear to be necessary. And in general, this is like stress fracture before the stress fracture. So it's going to take some rest and as much rehab and stimulation as you can do on the foot areas. You all know the foot is very complicated. There's not the, it's not a quad. It's not a hamstring. It's a little different down there when you're dealing with that. And it's important because obviously when you're talking about a guy with the elite traits that he has, the ability to rush off the edge, I think, he's either the first or second best prospect in this draft in terms of, I think, the overall consensus. Do you think that this is going to give teams pause at the top of the draft and maybe cause Abdul Carter to slide based on the foot, which again, pretty damn important for a guy coming off the edge?
Yeah, I don't think Carter's is in this weird spot where I'd love to tell you that it's a red flag that seems like a bit hard to deal with, I would say, and to phrase it politely. And the foot stuff, he's not going to test. Maybe he's going to test at his pro day on the Penn State fake track that everyone seems to run 4 140s at. Mm-hmm. I get it. I don't think it's going to hurt him in this draft because whether you like it or not, he's one of the blue chip guys. And I feel like he's going one unless we see a quarterback trade. Other than that, it just feels like the momentum is shifting to Carter one, two quarterbacks, Travis Hunter and Mason Graham, the top five in some order. And that's kind of how it's going to shake out. Like it just feels like, okay, if Hunter doesn't go, if Carter doesn't go one because they trade with the Giants, well, and Shador goes one, and Cleveland trades out, and then Cam goes two, and then it's Hunter and Graham to New England in Tennessee or whatever it may be. Like that's what it. I don't know if you got that vibe, Mike, all week. I felt like the top five, we don't know what order it's going to go in and who's going where, but it kind of feels like it's pretty set on who's going in the top five, at least as we're sitting here Friday morning.
Well, let's jump to Mason Graham, because Mason Graham not testing, saving that again for Michigan, as most of these top guys are not doing a ton of the testing. Weighed in at 296. Now, he was listed at 320 at Michigan. And as you know, and I know, and anybody who covers the NFL and college football knows, they're always jacking the numbers up a little bit. There's always an extra half inch for height. There's always an extra 10 pounds for weight. 24 pounds weight difference.
Something in the water, Mike, do you think? No, seriously, do you think?
Yeah.
Did you notice this across? I'll let you finish on Graham, but I was just curious. Everyone came in really light yesterday. I mean, Nick Scron, or however you want to pronounce his name, I pronounce it wrong every time. That dude played at like 300 pounds this year and was 257.
Right.
Yesterday, Mykel Williams was less than I thought he was going to be. Shemar, I thought he was going to bulk up and go to 290 and went down the other way to 267. James Pearce is like the only guy who bulked up. Everybody else, him and Jalen Walker, but I don't know. It's weird. Didn't you notice that like everyone was kind of trying to slim down, which is
it makes me wonder if in the conversations between the end of the season and getting ready for this that their agents had with various teams, that hey, we'd like to see him be leaner. We see him as we see him as an edge guy. We see whatever the case may be, and so trim down a little bit. To me, the Graham thing, I don't have people in New England are freaking out because there's sort of the assumption that you're going to build through the trenches, and if they don't like the Will Campbell short arms thing, which there's been varying reports. Mass Live just had a report that came out. We're taping this on Friday. It's 11:30, where they said no, Patriots they see him as a tackle. Okay, well, do they see him as a tackle at number 4? That would be my question.
Left tackle or right tackle too? That matters to me.
Yeah. No, it matters to me too. Same thing. You're not when you're in the 4th spot, you need to pick a premium player at a premium position, in my opinion. But I look at Graham and I say,
running back, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I just look at Graham and I say, just put in the tape. And I think,
player.
Yeah. And Michigan beats Ohio State at the end of the season and nearly gets Ryan Day fired because Graham and Kenneth Grant were awesome. They literally they were awesome. They dominated the football game. And that's what he is capable of doing. And I actually think when I look at it now from the Patriots perspective, and Patriots, there was news, of course, right after Mike Vrabel spoke, right after Elliott Wolf spoke on Wednesday, they've granted Devon Godchow, go seek a trade. Well, they're shifting what they're going to be up front. They want to be the 2 gapping days are over. They want to be a 1 gap, get up the field, penetrating team. And so people are like, "Oh, Mason Graham, that stinks that he's 296." I'm like, well, first of all, don't tell me you can't get to 305 and still have the same quickness, because he can. Like, he's that good of an athlete. Not Quinnen Williams athlete, but like he's that good anyway. But it's like 296 doesn't faze me one bit. Like do you want someone who can penetrate? At 296, he can penetrate, but he can also stop the run. So to me, it doesn't affect how I view Brandon Graham in the least bit, but there are people sort of freaking out like, oh, I wanted him to be 315. And if he was 315 and he's got those things, then like, that's a no brainer. But now, he's 296 and it's a deep class. To me, that's a separate argument. Like, it's a deep class. If you think there's someone comparable at a different position that you want to do it for and go get the defensive lineman in the 2nd or 3rd round because it's a deep class, that's not because Brandon Graham weighs 296.
No, the only thing I'll say with Mason Graham, you got
Mason Graham. I keep saying
another Michigan guy. No, it's another Michigan guy. It's fun. If you look at him aesthetically, and I'm not trying to be a dick, but if you look at him aesthetically, he kind of is like a.
Go ahead. You said it. You said it before we came on the air.
It's a little bit of like a little bit of a sloppier body. Like he just does. He doesn't look like somebody that you're like, wow, this dude looks like a tier 1 prototypical athlete, but he moves really well. It's nothing to do with that. He just he was standing. Schrager posted a picture of him, and it was like, okay, man, whatever. Just he's 6'3", 300 pounds, and he's not like a walking muscle that has he doesn't look like Aaron Donald, right? No. But his play's really good. If he doesn't go 4, he's going 5. The Jags love him. From everything you hear, they would be more than happy to take him at 5 and put Josh Hines Allen, I apologize, Trayvon Walker and Mason Graham on the same defensive line. And as much as, we'll see. But I don't have the Jets would be thrilled if Mason Graham got to 7. I just don't see it. So yeah, the height, weight, speed thing for him, I don't know what him not testing is a little weird to me, just because I feel like if you're going to drop weight, you should test.
Yeah, show me how.
Not just bench, which was you'd put on more weight. That doesn't really make sense. But overall, yeah, look, Graham's a good player, and I think there's a good chance he ends up in New England. I will probably be mocking him to New England quite often, just because I feel like he fits a need, and him and Barmore would be pretty damn good if both guys are healthy and ready to roll on opening day.
Yeah, quickly on Barmore, by the way. So Mike Vrabel talked about him briefly. I asked Elliot Wolf about him. He's working out in Tampa, which I had reported weeks ago. He's got a medical recheck, if you will, somewhere around April 1st. They're due in. The offseason program starts April 7th. So probably right around there. Feels like look, I don't think they fully know. And I don't know how you can know, right? He had the blood clots. You put him on the blood thinners. He was able to come back. He played 4 games, recurrence of symptoms. And now it's like, I don't know. So I don't even know that you can. And I keep kind of cautioning people about this. He wants to play ball. There's no question. But we don't know about it's just blood clots, man. We just, you have no clue what caused them. And if they did they did have a clue what caused them, then how come they came back again? So to me, that's sort of I don't know that you can put him in pen. You know what I mean? I think if he's able to play, awesome. They paid him big money to be a disruptive force like he was 2 years ago. That would be great. Especially with this draft too, I just think you got to double and triple down and make sure that you have better level players on the inside in case he can't go. And again, I think at this point, there's no predicting whether or not he can go. Before we move on to Mykel Williams, I did want to talk about PrizePicks because PrizePicks is awesome. They sponsor all the CLNS shows. 10 million members, billions of dollars. You can make real money sports action. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible. All you just more or less on up to 2 players, or rather on 2 players and up to 6 to win 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday each Tuesday. There's select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. You'll see the little goblins and the goat, whatever the things they are down there. Pretty cool. And then, hey, look, you're kind of into this thing, and it gives you some action every game. You say, do I think Steph Curry's going to go nuts tonight? Well, he generally does. He's going to have more than 4.5 3-pointers, or it's going to be a slow night. By the way, we're taping this after he scored 56 on Thursday night. He's still awesome. Love him. Just download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 off instantly. After you play your first $5 lineup, you can download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. To Mykel Williams, who, as I put in my Boston Sports Journal weekend notebook that came out on Thursday because there's so much stuff from the combine, we just had to get that out early, sort of beat everybody to the punch. He has fans in the Patriots organization. I don't know if at this point they'd be willing to take him at 4, but just know there are people in there that are intrigued by what he brings to the table. He is not testing. He just did the measurements. 6'5", 260. You thought, it's 265, 270. Ends up at 260. 10 1/4 inch hands, which is just absurd. I have a huge head, and that would just eclipse my head. 34 and 3/8 arm length. So again, those go-go gadget arms. Thought he might be at 35, but that's not too shabby.
He's not at 35. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's not too shabby. What do you make of him not competing, and what are you hearing about sort of how people are viewing Mykel Williams?
I really struggle with Mykel.
Me too.
I've talked about it. I understand you could do the thing like, hey, you like Shemar Stewart. How do you like Mykel Williams? I think their play is totally different, and I think they're very different athletes. Mykel feels very stiff to me. Shemar feels like a guy who's more explosive, and like you want a little bit more. You want a little more from Shemar for sure, but I feel like I want a little more from Mykel as well.
Yep.
I would not take him at 4, and I would not take him at 7 personally if I was a GM. But people are going to fall in love the same way they said, this is Trayvon Walker. This is the same thing. It's like, hey, Georgia guy, we saw some flashes, but he didn't really break out. They're like literally in this little cluster that's not a pleasant cluster to be in of win rate and true pass rush reps. And they're in this little bottom left-hand corner where you never want to end up, but he's like right on top of Trayvon Walker, and they're the same size, and they're going to test. I'm sure Mykel will run and do stuff at Georgia's pro day. I think he had the ankle or foot injury.
Yep.
Quote unquote, hampered him throughout the season. I can see why the Patriots would like him because it would fit. It would make sense. I just think it'd be at 14. You'd have a much different conversation than at 4. So I think people around the league will be really intrigued with him. He's another guy. It's like, hey man, if it clicks, look, Trayvon Walker, like people don't really talk about the fact that he's had 20 and a half sacks over the last 2 years, like back-to-back 10 sack seasons at 22 and 23 years old. It's pretty damn good. Again, I would be pretty critical on draft night if we came on here and the Jets, frankly, or the Patriots took him in the top 7. Could you convince me at 8 if Carolina goes, hey, we got to swing for the fences here,
right?
And we got to do it. And like the Patriots they have the quarterback, so like you kind of can't really afford to miss. And if you're the Jets, you have a bunch of these guys that are entering their prime. You really can't afford to miss on that either when there's other needs. So yeah, I struggle with that. I struggle with the Mykel stuff, but I understand, like, by all accounts, he's a good kid and coming from a great program, and he's got all the measurables and size and athleticism you want. He's a guy who probably will not 3-cone, and I will see. I'm sure we will know why. Similar to one guy we'll talk about, like when you don't test at either thing, and you're not hurt, pretty big red flag.
So we talked about Mykel coming into the process last week. And I viewed his tape. I watched a lot of his games this year. And he's, to me, right now, he's an edge 2. He's a really good run defender. You want to see more production. I think, and I wrote that in the piece that, that sort of like he has traits for days, but some people's coaches in particular are wondering, like, where was the production? Like 3 years. He's also 20. He doesn't turn 21 until the end of June. And I think I mentioned this on the program. I certainly wrote it in Boston Sports Journal. Like there are some people that think he could go to 280 and he could be the guy who kicks inside on pass rushing situations. Like he has the frame and the body to handle that and still maintain the athleticism that he has. But I would agree with you. To me, I just needed to see more. And even like, okay, go back and watch his tape as a sophomore. Felt like the same thing to me. It felt like I was still watching. I know he had the ankle injury, so maybe he felt like he was robbed of some of his push off and explosiveness this year. But I'm watching that player 2 years ago, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe there's a little bit more juice.
When's it going to happen for him?
Right. And again, he's super young. He's 20, so that's where the scouts versus the coaches, like the balance of like.
Are you, Mike? I guess this is a question I'd ask you is like. And I'm not saying you would take Shemar at 4 either. Booger McFarland said he would take Shemar at 1, which I love him. I'm probably higher in Shemar than anybody. That's insane.
Yeah.
Does Shemar project as a guy who could be your best edge rusher, in your opinion?
Yeah.
Does Mykel?
No.
Right. So, and I think both guys at 7 or at 4 are probably a little high. So, and I'm not saying these guys are bad players. I'm just, even like Mike Green, like I get it, but I also feel like, how do we get to 7? How do we get to like he's a top 7 pick? Not saying that you're wrong
Right.
or anyone's wrong. I don't know. How did we the season ended and we were like, hey, this one really good rep at the Senior Bowl, even though you lost the next two, and you pulled out of it. And then you had the sexual assault allegations and all that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
how did we get to, you just keep climbing boards when nothing's changed? He hasn't tested or done anything, where at least Shemar, you oh, this is what happens. The games turn off. We kind of remove the stats a little bit and we look at, wow, this dude's really impressive. Had a great all-star game, participated, did everything yesterday. You get it. I just wonder with Mykel and Mike Green, where it's you haven't done anything. Well, Mike Green, I guess, did participate in the Senior Bowl, so that's not fair. He did a good job. He had a really nice week, but you know what I mean? I wonder, he didn't test, so I don't know.
I think part of that is the coaches come into the process late, right? The scouts, all the front office people that are in charge of the draft, they're scouting. And then the coaches come in and go, oh my goodness. So who's this Mike Green kid? Oh, did you see what he did to Connerly on that one rep? Or did you see those 2 days of practice? You did mention something that, we have to discuss, because his stock has definitely been on the rise, and it's not much like I was talking about Pearce going in the wrong direction because of some of the stuff that we'd heard. Mike Green has been going in the right direction. And then the bombshell a couple days ago, where it was revealed he was the subject of 2 allegations of sexual assault. I'm reading from Pro Football Talk here, including one at Virginia, both of which he denies. Green said he's done nothing wrong. There's accusations out there. I've never been questioned, he said. I've never been asked. Nobody ever asked me a question about what happened before I departed from Virginia. It was just accusations that caused me to leave. He said he's open about the accusations because he has nothing to hide and did nothing wrong. He clarified that one allegation against him came in high school and another in an anonymous report when he was at Virginia. Of course, he finished his career at Marshall. Not testing, hamstring strain, I believe, but obviously he led the country with 17 sacks last season. And like I said, the momentum has been clear, and you just talked about it. He went from late first round to teens after the Senior Bowl to he might go top 10. Teams are going to have to do some serious due diligence on this. And I think if there are any red flags raised, then quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if, again, and this, I'm just speculating here, but if they don't like what they find investigating the allegations, and I'm sure the NFL security will get involved with this as well, then he goes right out of the first round. That's.
Yeah, he's a guy. I think Pearce will be like this. We'll see a number of people. This happens every year. I don't know. Again, me and Mike are both just saying this is he addressed it, and then there's one article. So we'll see. I'm sure more will continue to come out.
Absolutely.
Some teams will take these guys off their boards completely. Some guys will say not before certain pick X. And then some teams will be like, don't give a crap. That's just the reality. It's going to happen with a lot of different prospects for a lot of different reasons, injuries, off the field stuff, the way they interview, character stuff. Hey, they have degenerative knee stuff. I remember AJ Brown has the knee thing, and the teams didn't trade for him because he had the knee stuff and worked out for the Eagles, and they're going to get 2 contracts out of it. And if his knee ends up sucking in 3 years or when he turns 30, it is what it is. But, I just always remember that, I would just as a PSA, you're going to see this with numerous. Some people are going to not have Josh Simmons on their board because they're going to be the knees, don't trust it. Sorry. Yep. Other teams are going to be don't care. We'll take you at 5.
Right. Your tape was awesome.
It's awesome. You're the best
tackle. True left tackle. Yeah.
Yeah. That was just more of a general sentiment of this is what happens is, some people probably will be we wouldn't even have Shedeur on our board because that's not the type of quarterback we want. And other teams would be we take him 1 and we don't care. That's just what happens. So just as a PSA of with Green and a lot of these different Pearce, we've kind of referenced it. Again, they're different situations, but it seems like Mike Green's pretty adamant nothing happened. And again, I have no idea. I do think most teams are how'd you end up at Marshall? Mm-hmm. And there's multiple people. We're dealing with the Justin Tucker stuff and Watson. I'm not saying it's any of that stuff. My point is Jameis had the stuff in college. It didn't affect him, but it affected this other guy. So just think it's going to be a very long 8 weeks for him and leading up here, and cannot afford any other slip ups because then you'll start to be okay, dude, it's 3 different things. There's a pattern here.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's move on to the wide receiver
Marcus
class.
Williams being released, by the way.
Who is?
Marcus Williams, safety in Baltimore, is going to be released per Jeremy Fowler.
I mean, what a disaster that turned out to be, right? Gave him the big fat contract, and they ended up benching him this year. And even as they were going through all their struggles, like, nope, you're staying rooted right there. Yeah, that did not go as planned for the Ravens. They don't miss often. That was
an uncharacteristic. We're going to go big. They outbid the Jets, who said,
yep,
we're like the Ravens. We have our price. The Ravens went above their price, signed him. The Jets signed Jordan Whitehead and whatever, but it is kind of funny looking back. Like, the Ravens did the thing they never do, and they outspent, and actually 2 years later, he's already gone.
And now they're going to be like, remember when we modified our rules of engagement? Let's go back to the normal rules of engagement so that we don't see
$1 million deals for 38-year-old guards that somehow have a fountain of youth every time. Yeah,
it's pretty miraculous in that regard. Tet McMillan. So in a class of wide receivers that is less than inspiring, and as Elliot Wolf, the Patriots executive vice president of player personnel, because they can't give a general manager title because they're cheap, or I don't know why. Tet McMillan, other than Travis Hunter, was the guy, right? 6'5", 200 and whatever, 15 pounds. His tape is good. Tet McMillan not running at the combine.
Or the combine, he reported.
Right, and I was going to say, and not only is he not running at the combine, he is not running at his pro day. This is Drake London all over again. Drake London, people wondered how fast Drake London was, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's not a total apples to apples comparison, but just work with me here. Drake London was like, he knew what he ran. I don't know if it was a 4.68 or a 4.72, but he knew. And he knew if I go put that on tape, someone can see that, then some teams will ding me. They'll just be like, you know what? He's just not explosive enough. Meanwhile, my tape is awesome. You see my tape. I make contested catches. I bully people. I'm good with the ball in my hands after I make the catch. And he didn't test it all. He goes 8 overall to Atlanta, 69, 72, and 100 catches.
He had the broken foot, just as a precursor. So that there was at least you're probably going to run high 4.5s, but you have the broken foot. So we'll let you kind of slide on that one. Ted does not have a broken foot.
Ted does not have a broken foot. In fact, as far as we know, Ted is perfectly healthy. But Ted is not going to run. So Ted is basically telling everybody, I'm going to, and then you and I had heard some rumblings about 4.7s.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't blame him because his tape is good.
I would have said to fire his agent if he let him run.
Right.
Mike, I'm curious I don't know if you've researched this, but someone that works in the NFL in scouting world I asked him about Tet, and he said, you looked at his production. And I was like, yeah, of course, 1,300 yards, 8 touchdowns this year. Then I dug a little deeper. New Mexico game, West Virginia, 506 yards combined, 5 touchdowns. Yeah. The rest of the year, 700 plus yards, 3 touchdowns. It's not saying that he's not a good player. It's not saying he's not a first-round pick. I think as the media goes, and maybe we'll be proved wrong, I feel like the media is higher on him than the league is. He's 2 or 3 on a bunch of really well-respected draft analyst board. As the third, second, him, Genty, and Travis Hunter are the top 3 players in the class. And I think Genty is definitely the best running back. Some people I don't think are going to have McMillan 1 or 2 as the best. Some people are going to love Luther Burden. Some people are going to love Matt Golden. Some people are going to love Emeka Ibuka, who's probably going to run 4.4, who is going to crush all the interviews. Yep. He's a really polished player. There's no downside. I like Tet. I'd like Tet a lot more at 19 to Tampa Bay than I'd like Tet at 4 to New England. I know they need receivers, but I almost feel like if you have the right OC and the right quarterback, you can kind of get some B plus guys around him and not shoot for the A guy when left tackle is still a problem, for example. Right. So I'm not trying to hate on him.
Well,
It is a big red flag, right?
yeah, I mean, and Elliot Wolf did say, he's obviously, as we've been talking about, D line, tight end, running back, probably the three best positional groups in the draft. And he's like, when it comes to offensive line and wide receiver, it's meteor in the middle of the draft. And that's we're talking about the Jalen Royal type, we're talking about those sorts of players at wide receiver that would be in that, whatever, late second, third, early fourth place versus at the top of the draft. And I agree with you. And I think there's actually a chance now that Ted does end up going somewhere in the teens, in the late teens.
Every day at 19 for Mykel or Tet makes so much sense.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, you'd be if you land that type of player there, there's high fives in the draft room. You're like, okay, we just made ourselves better today. That's just the idea of taking a player like that at 4 or 7 or 9 or whatever. It just seems way too risky. And just, I don't know, they're better players. There are better players at other positions. And I think if you're a team early, I play to the strengths of this draft, play to the D line. For if you're in desperate need of Ashton Genty and a running back and want to build your offense around a running back, which some teams have done recently, go for it. I would not sit here and tell you you're an idiot because he's that kind of player. Let's transition a little bit quickly to, before we get out of here, to some NFL stuff. There was a story in The Athletic about the Patriots not being in on Tee Higgins, which is not what I heard. Now, and this is not a me versus the other reporter situation. We all get different information from different people. I'm sure he's getting his information from a good source. I'm not questioning that at all. Just telling you I got different information. One, as I was reminded, well, Mike, he's not available. And it's true. Everybody's been talking about Tee Higgins, got to go get Tee Higgins. Cincinnati, and my reporting has only been firmed up on this from being in Indianapolis for a couple of days. Jamar Chase is going to get paid. They're going to do that. But Tee Higgins is number 2 on their list. He's ahead of Trey Hendrickson in terms of what they want to do this offseason. And Trey's on the wrong side of 30. So I can sort of understand, like, we don't want to pay Trey Hendrickson because the history of guys, pass rushers over 30, they'd fall off a cliff fairly quickly. Tee Higgins is not even 26 years old. Again, you can quibble with whether or not this is great team building for a team that couldn't stop a nosebleed last year, but Tee Higgins is important to them. He's going to get franchised if they can't work out a long-term deal in the next week. The tag deadline, I think, is March 4th, and then they'll continue to try to work on something going forward. And look, maybe they get to a point where he says, I'm not coming back, and you got to trade me, but at least they have him on the tag. And then if you're a team like the Patriots, then do you engage knowing that, A, you're going to have to pay, a huge freight for a contract, but also now give up picks? And would there be a team who looks at Tee Higgins and says, we're that one guy away, and we will give the first round pick? Because as always, you'll start thinking, well, they couldn't get a deal done. Can I get it for a second? I don't think you can. But I was told definitively that if Tee Higgins is available in free agency, the Patriots will be at the head of the line. So I think that's just important to note. And again, that's not shade on the other guy. I know people love to, you're beefing. No, I'm not beefing. We all have different sources. I trust mine just as he trusts his. So there's that. What do you have from a Jets perspective?
Yeah, I would say the Jets want to bring Jamie Sherwood back.
And they should.
I think they'll be a strong and aggressive push to get him to come back pre-free agency, get a deal done in the next 2 weeks. I think once he gets to the market, you could see him go because the aspect of guys just get overpaid. That's just the way. Then Mike, right? We talked about it on Tuesday in person. Like, this is what happens. It just, guys get overpaid. So I think the Jets would like to bring Sherwood back. He's a guy they developed, a young player. He's only 25 years old. Took a big step last year. He's not a perfect player, but can grow in this system.
He's a good player.
He's a
good player.
Well liked.
Quentin Williams in front. It's a good fit.
I'd like to see him brought back. It'll be the interesting thing will be when he inevitably gets paid more than Quincy Williams, who already wants a new deal. I'm just curious on, does that lead to, hey, we'll give you a bump and extra year. We don't really want to give you 3 years because you're 29.
Right.
That'll be the one just as another one to keep an eye on. Just like what do they how they maneuver that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked a little bit in the past during the season that they're probably fixing for some sort of headbutting with Quincy Williams
I
on.
asked and I got refuted back like no shot. But I also
He's
think
not.
Aaron Glenn had an interesting quote. He said, "This is not the first time, and this will not be the last that I make a decision everyone hates, but it's for the best of the team." So I'm not saying that's Quincy Williams. I'm just saying something will happen with the Jets at some point this year that Glenn makes some unpopular quote unquote decision. I don't know what that is at the moment, but I'm sure there'll be one.
I think the smart thing to do is go to Quincy Williams, even maybe right now before the Sherwood thing, and just here's, like you said, whether you're adding a year or you're just giving him more guaranteed money, put him in a happy place because he's still a really good football player and an important piece for that team.
You think about Rodgers and the Giants.
Rodgers apparently made the call, right? Asked the Giants if they were interested, which I think is hilarious because I think, to your point about like
Oreo having that report, there's something so much, there's so funny about it. Just knowing that their relationship the way it is.
I think that Brian Daboll would spontaneously combust.
No, they'd kill each other.
When on 3rd and 8, late in the game, he ran the clock down to 1 and then threw a 4-yard check down. Like
threw in the back of Tyrone Tracy's head and then yelled at Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, yelled at Neighbors, yelled at Tracy, yelled at Daboll. Like, no, it would just be. I as a card carrying member of the I Like Brian Daboll fan club, I do not want that for Brian. Now Brian needs to win.
I don't want it for either of them.
Yeah, Brian needs to win. So, I get like maybe even entertaining the idea because it's better than what you have. But, oh, baby, that would be.
Rodgers Shedeur quarterback room would feed families.
Unbelievable. The stories that would come from that.
Does Rodgers ask him about 9/11 first day?
Probably schools them on the art of it. You got anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
Nah, we'll do some more stuff as we'll kind of recap the weekend, what people run and stuff like that. They're gonna have to do something with the combine and change this thing around. And I don't know how they're gonna punish the agents or the players for not doing it, but frankly, a lot of these guys not testing. Not sure you think you are. Not to be that guy, not to be like the old man on your lawn, but like a lot of these guys not testing. Ooh, hamstring's barking a little. It's like, dude, you're a 3rd round pick,
right? At
best, if you would have tested well. Like, let's again, maybe for some of the top guys, I get what happens, but I would just say some of these agents give bad advice, and I would make sure you have the right agent because a lot of these guys not testing it's frustrating. It's frustrating for teams. It's frustrating for coach. Like these teams fly a majority of the organizations out to come meet with you and stuff, and a lot of, and yeah, and it's just like to no show it or to be like, hey, I'm good. And maybe I'll run at my pro day in a juice time that's not real. These guys have times, by the way, on all these guys from last summer and weights and heights and interviews. And I just sometimes think that everyone thinks these coach teams are stupid and like they're not going to notice it. And trust me, they notice everything.
Yes, it's right there on the spreadsheet in front of them, which they one click they can get all of it. And most of these guys that like they got the brains that work that way. That you just ask them about a player and like 35 and a 1/4 inch arms, blah blah blah. They can just spit that stuff out at you like it was nothing. So I agree with you. I think probably the way that it can turn is if the teams start punishing the player. Like, you know what? I'm not drafting you, or I'm drafting you 2 rounds later. Like, but again, you'll always have the team that goes.
Player, by the way, generally, and the combine is extremely long and all these different things, but like, I don't know. I just the one way you really punish it is like these guys can't test twice. So you can't test at your pro day and the combine. Like, if you don't test at the combine and you're healthy, you can't test at your pro day. Type of thing. That's the only thing I can think of.
My problem with that is that then how can you again, if I say, "Ooh, my hamstring hurts," how do you know that I'm BSing? I mean,
Because
I mean, look, you probably know that I am BSing.
Everyone knows you're lying.
Yeah, I just like, but you can always say, let's like, you can always say like,
Yeah.
I mean, look at the NBA. Like, oh my, we're gonna get, we have to do this because of the new league rules.
You're gonna Paul George it?
Yeah. Did you hurt your piggy toe? Did you hurt your little pinky? Like
your podcast because you suck at basketball now.
Oh, Jesus, stop the podcast when you suck that bad.
I'm taking a hiatus.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the All 32. We appreciate you being with us as always. Please listen, like, subscribe, rate, review, do all those wonderful things here as we continue to grow the brand. We love being in person. Now we're back to the whatever this is, the Zoom, the stream, all this stuff. But anyway, we love it. We appreciate you, and we will talk to you on Monday.